Today's episode is part 2 of our Science of Reading deep dive with Allison McDonald. If you're just tuning in, don't forget to go back and listen to episode 1 first. I think it's interesting you mentioned the new teachers because, when I started reading this book, I started getting really reflective and thinking deeply about my experiences as a teacher from the get-go. And I realized that although I may not have been taught to do some of these things explicitly, I did learn their importance along the way and incorporate them. And it just reminds me that I was trained for a year when I was a brand new teacher in one of the phonics programs that actually they recommend for Science of Reading now. I'm not going to name which one it was, but I was intensely trained in that. And I thought a lot of it was probably boring and way above the kids' heads, but there were a few things that I took away from it that I incorporated into my teaching practice and have used ever since. And they're phonics based. And I think that that is what helped me in the classroom, because when there was that gap, that phonics gap, I was able to pull on that training that I had. And if you aren't me and you didn't go through this intensive phonics 1-year-long program where I had to actually be a student, be one of the children, then you might not know this, certain rule, phonics rule or whatever it is. I'm not good at naming them, but I do know them when I see them. It's been a while. But anyway, I just thought that was really interesting when you mentioned that.
Well, I think too that it's easy. One of the really tough things, and we've talked about this before with early childhood, is that so many of the resources are made for grades and ages older than our students. There isn't a ton out there. And I am definitely a buffet person, meaning I like to throw out lots of things and see where my students are at. And that works really well for younger preschool. I think I'm going to be more intentional this year, not prescribed, not scripted, but I'm going to have some strict routines, not schedules, I don't know exactly where my students will be at with these routines, but I'm going to make sure that we're doing syllables every week, that we are doing rhyming every week, that it's not just as much. The emergence will come out in the exact activity, not necessarily in what kind of activity. So it's going to be a little more refined. And I think that's likely how I would describe this shift for me, is that it's not new, it's just refined.
Right.
I'm refining this practice, I'm refining that practice. It's not all new though, not at all. And so it can be really hard sometimes to get a resource and try and figure out, wait, is this for me though? So much of it is not geared to us.
Right.
And so we have to use our frameworks when we look at this. We have to use our framework of developmentally appropriate practice. And we have to use our framework knowing what we know about development. And so it's not easy. It's not easy to do that. But I also think that every early childhood educator that I've met could do it. You are a professional. You have wonderful experience that will help you really discern what needs to be done. So don't be afraid to jump into these resources. You can do it. And I think that a lot of early childhood educators, especially ones that may not have a university degree, kind of feel like they're not capable of doing this. And that's so not true. You absolutely can. You are smart professionals who can do this.
Yeah, I agree so much. And, getting back to the things that we can tweak, I really liked this is so simple that it's not even hardly worth mentioning, but yet it is using consistent terminology. And when the authors gave an example about using the words letters and sounds interchangeably and how confusing that can be. And I was like, oh, wow, that's true. That is.
I have it highlighted too.
Yeah. I mean, just making sure that when you're asking children to identify sounds, that you use the word sound. What sound do you hear? Not what letter do you hear? What sound do you hear? That was such an easy tweak, just being more mindful. That was the only thing I needed to do. Just be more mindful of the words that come out of my mouth when I'm asking children what sounds they hear. That's it.
Oh, absolutely. Instead of saying, what letter do you hear?
Right.
That stops them. What letter do you hear here? Well, you don't hear a letter, you see a letter.
Right, exactly. Another thing that I really, really liked, and that's definitely something new that I would incorporate, is the articulatory gestures. Now, it sounds like a big old mouthful, but it's just basically, what does your mouth look like when you say these sounds? And I immediately thought of our speech and language pathologist who's been doing that forever and a day, and was something that she always did with kids. And I'm like, well, why can't I do that to support children too? Because it's helpful for all children, not just children with speech and language delays. Yeah. So just using those photos, and they're all over the place now. Ever since the Science of Reading came out, you can find those articulatory gestures. They're just like the way your mouth looks when you say s and all that stuff. All the ways that your mouth looks is.
And I think it's going to be really important. I know I'm going to be masked this year. And so I do think I plan on at some point going outside with my students where we can take our masks off, probably at snack time, and having mirrors and looking at our faces. How does it look when you say your name? Starting something meaningful. This doesn't have to be totally abstract. Start with meaningful. Oh, look how it looks when we say Miss Allie, Miss, and breaking it down. So it's meaningful. It's interesting. But between all of my students' names, actually, I think I have like 5 L names this year. But anyway, all of my students' names, we can probably get to most of the things. And I think just like how we break down science or we break down any topic and learning area for early childhood, we don't have to be as specific with those. We want to introduce that because it is very likely when they get to kindergarten, they might have a sound wall with the gestures. They'll be familiar with that. And isn't that our job, to make school welcoming and help make them ready for it? So if we introduce it in early childhood, then they can build on it in kindergarten and first grade.
Right. And I think you hit on another good point, Allison, and that is the sound wall. And that's one of the biggest questions I've been getting this summer from teachers who are taking that state mandated training that a lot of states are making all public educators take, including pre-K teachers in some cases, is I need to get rid of my word wall and do a sound wall, right? How does that look? What do I do? And I don't think I got that from the book. I didn't come away with throw away your word wall, put up a sound wall. I came away with incorporate articulatory gestures.
Yes.
And that can be done with a mirror, right?
I don't think there was even the word sound wall in this
book. Yeah.
I found it in other stuff that I read, but definitely I don't think I'm not putting one up. I don't have a word wall though either in my class, honestly. We use text very meaningfully, but I'm not concerned with my students at that level of literacy in pre-K. But I know that some states have different, I don't do sight words either in pre-K. I never have.
It's all about wording and vocabulary, and not, in my case, it was a name wall is what it was. It was the alphabet with the children's names underneath. They call that a word.
That I do have. Yes, actually. But I don't think we need to worry about sound walls in pre-K.
Right.
And I haven't found anything that supports using it in pre-K because our students are really kind of pre-alphabetic principal to early alphabetic principal at this age. And so when you look at what they need to learn for that age, sound walls are the next step, not what we're doing. So I would, if someone's asking me to do it, I would ask them to support that with reasons. I don't feel like we need it. I don't think it would hurt anyone. I don't think it's harmful if you have it. So please don't think, oh no, I'm doing the wrong thing. I have one. But I don't feel like we need to run out and make one either.
Right. And I think that, the idea of a sound wall is great. great for older children. I think that when you bring it down to the pre-K level, now you run into the gray area, or maybe it's not a gray area really, but more of black and white area. Children, when they look at the alphabet on the wall, right? So let's say we all have an alphabet somewhere, and typically we have their names underneath, Michael's letters under M and so forth. And now we're going to take an abstract concept, right? Because the alphabet is abstract. We've already kind of abstracted it even further by then putting the child's name underneath. And now we're going to add something else to clutter the wall, and that's the articulatory gesture. Unless a child goes to that wall, sound wall, name wall, whatever you want to call it, with you, and you explicitly point to the picture and have them make the sound, that's the only time that connection is really going to be made. It has to be done with the teacher. Having it on your wall and not using it then is just the osmosis theory that they will somehow learn it by having it there. It has to be explicitly used. So unless you're going to be using that every day, and having them go up and point, I don't see the point, because you can use the mirror, which is more helpful. If you're in a masked situation, then using those photos is going to be great. They're all over the place. I won't even mention different places you can get them, but they've all of a sudden become a thing now that people can make money off them. But pictures of children making the sounds with their mouth. Ideally, if it's an ideal world, I would say take pictures of your own students doing that and use those and make like a flip book or something. That's a great class book right there. I'm always looking for those. But yeah, I think it's an important thing to think about. The other thing they mentioned, Allison, is the difference between phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, and just being aware that there is a difference. I'm like, okay, done, check,
There is a difference. Exactly. Think of phonological awareness as an umbrella. It's a big, long word. It makes that nice curve of umbrella. And underneath it includes phonemic awareness is something that is a subset.
Right.
And more specific.
Exactly. And phonemic awareness is about the sounds as well. But the phonological awareness is about all the different types of sounds that we can hear in syllables, and we can break them into, compound words and all the other things that come with it.
Right. And rhyming and alliteration, that's all phonological. Phonemic is the phonemes, the actual individual sounds.
Yep. So just knowing and being aware of the difference, that was another thing. And I was like, okay, great. We can make sure that we know the difference between phonemic and phonological awareness. We can incorporate some articulatory gestures and use consistent language when it comes to using the terms sounds and letters with our kids, making sure that when we are asking for a sound that we're actually saying the word sound and not saying the word letter. So I thought that those were all super easy.
I think another one that stood out to me, and it's something I've done for a very long time, so it was kind of like yes, I've been doing this with my 3-year-olds for years, is knowing that their speech can become print. Yeah. That is what it is. That print is speech. And so is written down words. And so one of the ways that I do that really simply is, again, with my puppet. My puppet asks the question of the day. And because he's so quiet, I have to write down his words. So I say to him things like, would you like me to write down what you're saying and read it back to you?
That's genius.
Let me write down your words. And so we also do a lot of dictation. So like once a month, my students draw a picture and dictate what the picture is. And my co-teacher will say, okay, I'm going to write down your words and say it back to you. And it seems so simple, but just saying these are your words that you are saying and I'm saying them back to you helps learn that, which is part of the alphabetic principle, that written text are spoken words. So they need to learn that. And a lot of people, I remember explaining this to another coworker of mine. She was like, they know that. And I was like, they don't know that. They don't know that yet. Right. That is our job, to teach them that. Right. And it's a very important foundation of literacy. Because really, the same way that we may look at another language like Cyrillic, I've traveled a lot, and looking at Cyrillic alphabet is like, that's just a bunch of squiggles. That is how it feels for our children to look at the English language and our alphabet. It's just a bunch of squiggles at first. We need to give it meaning. And one of the very basic things is to make sure they understand that their words become print.
Absolutely. Awesome. I wonder if we could turn now to those things that in science of reading that maybe caused the biggest parts of the controversy. And I think that those are the things that are removed from the preschool and pre-K level because they're really more for the older grades. And those two things were sight words. That'll be a big shift for older grades, and the MSV, which is the meaning, structure, and visual that usually you get when you do a running record with this child. So those two things right there, I think, are kind of the crux of the science of reading and that are causing a lot of controversy. But I really think, and the authors, I think, also made it clear. What do you think, Allison? They made it clear that that's more for older children, right?
Absolutely. I haven't done a running record since I student taught second grade, which was a very long time ago. And I've been a reading tutor for elementary age students for years as well. I haven't done it for a few years, but definitely using the strategies, the MSV strategies, which we call 3Qing, I believe is another term for it, because I wasn't familiar with MSV. I was like, what is that? Everyone keeps saying that. I was like, oh, we call it this. Teacher jargon is very regional. And so I think even as a reading tutor, I saw very much that if kids just use content, they're not going to become better decoders. And they can't be better readers if they're not better decoders. And so I really like the way the book, they didn't take M out. They just emphasized V. So they emphasize the visual, emphasize what is decoding and looking at the word before you use the other strategies. And I think that's really important because those other strategies aren't without merit. They're just, we need to emphasize the V strategy, which is the visual, which is decoding, and look at the word, look at every letter of the word. I remember saying that to a first grader that I was tutoring. Wait, look at the word. I want to look at the picture. First, let's look at the word. Let's look at that. And the thing is, too, is that I think a lot of teachers, if they don't have a lot of experience with working with students who are struggling, they may, looking at the pictures might have worked for the vast majority of their students. And the students, their cogs caught and they were fine. But we don't only teach the vast majority. We teach all of the students in our class. So I do think that they handled it very, very well. And I think that they can really show that we're not throwing it away.
Right.
We're just shifting it, which is exactly why they call it shifting the balance.
Exactly.
And then the other thing was sight words. Sight words are interesting. I'm very interested that the first thing is that it's always bothered me that people don't understand really what a sight word is. A sight word is any word you know by sight. It is not just high frequency words. And so reading that in the book, I was like, yes, I wrote an article about this years ago. Woohoo, I'm so glad this is getting out there. But I had a hard time with, I do think that some emphasis on memorization, despite my blog being called No Time for Flashcards, I do think that helping children learn with some automacy, learning that can really boost confidence. I've seen children boost confidence, get their confidence boosted, and then they can use that energy for the word that is really hard to decode. And so I think this book really, they really focused on the fact that it's not don't do it. It's the fact that most sight words can be taught to be decoded. We can. That's a fallacy that a lot of people truly hold on to. Sight words, most of them, you can decode. There are very few that have so many irregularities that a young child couldn't decode. Most you can. We just don't teach them that way. I don't know why. But I do still think that if I was teaching kindergartner first, I would still be doing some fun activities with high frequency words because I see how much it helps. But I might not be teaching them for the first time that way. Right. And I think that's what they were really saying is that we should still be teaching them this way. You can practice them later, in the way that we've been doing sight words, historically.
Yeah. I mean, we still need to teach the phonics roles. And I think that I do believe that there a lot of issues have arisen in the most recent years because of our emphasis on maybe sight words and not decoding, our de-emphasis of decoding, rather, if you will, and also the three cueing system that doesn't emphasize decoding as well. I think that those have caused a lot of issues, and I think that going forward, the way we do sight words needs to change a bit. And I really hope, this is my secret hope, Allison, is that school districts, because of this, will get rid of those ridiculous kids must know 100 sight words before they enter kindergarten. Excuse me. Really? Because I didn't know. I thought the only requirement to be a kindergartner was that you needed to be 5 years old. So I'm hoping that this information will now force school districts to drop those ridiculous recommendations.
Well, and hopefully kindergarten can be for 5-year-olds. As someone who sent her 5-year-old who had just turned 5 to kindergarten, it was very hard for her, despite the fact that she has a ridiculously high IQ. And so it was very frustrating. And I totally agree with that. And I think another thing that, I forgot. Hold on just a second. Okay. Let me think of what it was. It was, you were saying something about sight words. And, I know what I was going to say, which is that I really like how they emphasize that the focus should be on decoding, because guess what? The more a child decodes, the better they get at it. The more opportunities they have to decode. So whether that's when they're stuck on a word, just the same way that if we're not good at a sport, we practice it and we get better. We can't expect our students to be better decoders if we don't give them opportunities to decode. And they make that point very clear. I think I actually Instagrammed a picture of a quote talking about that, because it's true. And it's just common sense. If we want them to be better at a skill, we have to give them the opportunity to use and practice that skill.
Awesome. Well, I think we've done, I don't know about how you feel, but I feel like we've tackled the subject pretty adequately here, put people's minds at ease, I hope. If we had to boil it down to one or two sentences about what this episode was about, just for those of us who need a summary, what do you think that we would say about the science of reading and how it relates to pre-K and preschool? I hate to put you on the spot like that, but.
No, it's fine. I think that we can say that the science of reading uses the research that has been around for a long time and many of us have been using, and that what we really talked about was what we need to shine lights on. Right. We're using all of this. Everything's already up on stage. We might just have to change our lighting a little bit and just shift where we're putting more intention.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say, is that really so much of this is stuff we're already doing. Yeah. It's just tweaking it, like you said. It's just finding those tweaks.
I feel like if we could rename the whole movement, science of reading, to something, I would call it a same page meeting. We need to have a meeting to make sure we're all on the same page, really, instead of having this movement that's kind of causing a lot of uproar and unease in the education field. Like really, that's the last thing we need in 2021. 2020 was tough enough, right? Do we really need...
That's why it took me until now to do this, because I have been teaching online, teaching in person, writing the curriculum as I go this year. It was crazy. And so now it's the first time I've been able to really dive into it. And, but I mean, there are, like you said, there are so many districts that are jumping on it. And I don't think the trainers for all of those even know what science of reading is. There is
Right.
definitely some that don't know, and they're focusing on all the wrong things.
Well, just for our listeners out there who want to see or hear the book, for our viewers, you can see it on the screen. But for our listeners, the book that we're using as kind of the basis of our discussion during this episode is Shifting the Balance: 6 Ways to Bring the Science of Reading into the Balanced Literacy Classroom by Jan Berkins and Carrie Yates. And that book has been the guide for our conversation today. If you're looking for a way to really put your mind at ease and to look at the different, they break it up into grade levels. Here's what you should be focusing on preschool and pre-K. Here's what you should be focusing on in K and 1 and so forth. And they really set it out in this easy to digest way. The book was not hard to read. I read half of the book in about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then the same for the rest of it. It's not a hard read. It's very clearly laid out.
I like how they talk about misunderstandings. So they'll have the misunderstanding, and then, okay, how can we really change our practice or shift our practice?
Yeah.
And I laughed at one thing talking about rewriting high frequency words with smelly markers. Even if you do it with smelly markers, it just it made me laugh. I think I wrote ha. But,
I missed that one.
They really do have, and they break it down in ways that sometimes, we're not in the science of it all
right.
the time, and really looking, being like, oh, that's orthographic mapping. Of course. Okay.
Yeah.
I hear that word all the time, but so I feel like you can go to it without feeling like it's going to be too high, but they're not speaking down to anyone either.
Right. Yeah. I thought it was a very fair and balanced look at the whole thing. And, I hope this sets our listeners' minds at ease. Know that you continue to do the great jobs that you always do, and use this as a point of reference. If you want to move forward or look at the different shifts, you can use this episode as a reference. And Allison, tell us where our viewers and listeners can find you if they want to continue the conversation with you, because you've written 2 awesome books, which I already mentioned, but you feel free to mention them again and tell us where we can find you.
One is Over My Shoulder Right Now, Setting the Stage for Rockstar Readers, which you can find anywhere that sells books online. And it is meant for early childhood educators, and it's all about literacy activities that you can do in your classroom. And it hits on most of this stuff. So I was very glad I was checking off the boxes as well, making sure, oh no, do I have this all? Is my book going to be obsolete? But it wasn't at all. And then you can also find me on my website, notimeforflashcards.com, where I have a whole bunch of stuff for preschool and pre-K, meant for parents and teachers to have fun and keep learning with their students.
That's awesome. It's funny that you mentioned that you were worried about your book being obsolete, because I get a lot of questions because my book came out recently, and people ask me all the time, is it Science of Reading aligned? Is it Science of Reading aligned? I get that question a lot. And now after reading this, I can say, yes, it is. Just keep in mind some of the things that you should shine your spotlight on a little stronger, but
yes.
Anyway. Thought that was really funny. But
I did exactly that. I mean, I was like, okay, is it? It is. Oh, thank goodness. Because like we said at the very start, teachers don't like to be telling people to do the wrong thing.
Right.
We want to make sure that we are aligned with the research, but both of us were to start with, so there's nothing to worry about.
That's awesome. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Allison McDonald. Until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin. You're listening to Elevating Early Childhood. Thanks for tuning in. Onward and upward.